And today we're going to talk about the chronic management of IC and understanding what we need to do on a daily basis to help manage the problem. So without further ado, we'll get started. I just wanted to remind everyone that this control panel that you have on the right upper corner of your screen has a yellow hand. You can click on it and it raises your hand, and then you can type in a question and I can respond to it while we're actively recording. Even though you're in listen-only mode, I can also unmute you like I did before we started. So with that in mind, I wanted to cover the basics of what we did in session 1 just as a recap, just to bring us up to date, because this is all, as we talked about in the threads, this is all new information, and so it takes time to get used to seeing a different way of healing, and that's what we're talking about actually in these sessions. So in session 1, we talked about how in the energy science work that nature is described in terms of qualities, and these qualities, hot and cold, mobile and inert or static, heavy and light, these are all qualities that describe nature. And it's the imbalance of these qualities that lead to disease. And interstitial cystitis is an imbalance of basically two qualities, the hot quality and the mobile quality. And therefore it becomes a Pitta-Vata disorder. These are biological, physiologic energy patterns that are found in the physiology that we can organize these qualities around. And Pitta has the hot quality, Vata has the mobile quality, and these two qualities actually distinguish Pitta and Vata from one another, as well as from Kapha, which is not as prominent in this disorder. The origin of all disease, then, is the GI tract, and that is an energy science fundamental principle, that all disease begins in the GI tract, and because of that, it becomes paramount that nutritional choices that we make become a guiding way of dealing with this disease. We also said that all qualities make up nature, so the qualities that are in a piece of broccoli are the same qualities that are in you. The qualities become the common currency between you and the foods that you eat. So therefore, foods are you, and you are foods. There is no difference. The qualities that make up the piece of broccoli make up you as well. So therefore, if you take in excess hot in the nutrition that you use, then you will increase the hot of the body itself. We also said that real healing takes time, and for us that are impatient about wanting it yesterday, this takes on a big meaning, because Vata and Pitta, when combined, become very impatient. So the idea is that as time moves along and you do this work, real healing will occur and you'll have a resolution of IC. Nutrition and aloe vera are, as we've talked about, foundational in therapy. If there are two things that you can do in order to start your healing process, start your healing journey in interstitial cystitis, it's to use nutrition and aloe as a fundamental first step. We also talked about the mind and body being intimately spliced. That is, you cannot separate the body and the mind. They are intimately connected. What is body is mind, what is body is mind, what is mind is body. What that translates to is that foods can produce imbalances in the physiology, and particularly even in the mind. So foods can produce irritability. They can produce a feeling of mental heaviness or mental lethargy. So these are all characteristics of an energy model that we're talking about. We also said that we also talked about this concept of digestive fire or digestive power or strength. And in the energy science tradition, it's called Agni. And we've maintained these words because they are so descriptive of what is a fundamental fact from a physiological point of view. Agni also translates as metabolism. And so when we want to heal IC or any disease in the body, we necessarily have to address this concept of digestive strength or Agni. If your Agni is weak and you cannot digest foods well, you won't be able to digest herbs for healing as well either. So you can take all the aloe in the world, but if the aloe is not being digested properly, then it's not very helpful. So paying attention to how to improve Agni is very important. Food intolerances and allergies are actually related to weak Agni. And this has been a common thread of misunderstanding in the West in terms of how we see these intolerances. People make the mistaken conclusion that if they stop eating gluten and they feel better, that it's because they are intolerant or allergic to the gluten, when in reality the reason that they have problems with gluten in the first place is because of weak Agni. If you remove a very hard protein to digest, like gluten, then you feel better. But it's not because you removed it. It's because the Agni was weak to begin with. So GI tract symptoms, as we talked about in session 2, are related to weak Agni, the bloating, the congestion, the heaviness after eating, the variability of appetite. These are all related to poor Agni. So the status of Agni is determined by the degree of appetite. So if you have a rich, strong appetite, and you have a clear tongue, that is no coating on the tongue, which is a characteristic of Ama that we'll talk about in a bit. This characteristic of Agni can be assessed by these two characteristics. Poor Agni then leads to what's called Ama, and it keeps the hot and mobile qualities in the pelvis. So the disease of interstitial cystitis is related to the hot and mobile qualities, and they get stuck in the pelvis in chronic conditions because of Ama that is associated with these qualities. And we said that there are many symptoms of weak Agni, and there are, fortunately, many solutions for weak Agni. And these center around lifestyle and herbal interventions. In the last session, we talked about the acute management of flare. And we said that the acute manifestation of the hot and mobile qualities that are localized in the pelvis, that acceleration of these qualities produces the flare. We also said that Ama becomes involved because these qualities get locked up in the pelvis because of this material that prevents the the qualities from leaving. And this hence harks back to the fact that if we don't have a strong Agni, what may happen for us is that this Ama causes the qualities of hot and mobile to get stuck in the pelvis. Castor oil spread over the lower abdomen and treating specific marmosites, along with use of essential aroma oils, can be very helpful in terms of management of the acute flare symptom. Shatavari, used as an oil-soaked tampon placed in the vagina for a period of time, can also be very medicinal to the treatment of acute flares. And then lastly, we talked about the vaginal and or bladder irrigations that can be used to use the concept of targeted herbal therapy in terms of the management of IC. So this brings us to the up to speed now with respect to what we want to cover today, which is essentially the chronic management. And I wanted to just briefly discuss the difference between chronic and acute, because in the acute management, that's where you're having the flare. You're going to pull out these various tools, such as we talked about just a minute ago, Shatavari tampon, the castor oil with Marma and therapy and essential aromas, the vaginal and bladder targeted herbal irrigations. These are all acute tools that we would use. We wouldn't use these all the time. But the chronic management, that is when you're not in flare, revolve around nutritional formats, incompatible food combinations that we'll talk about after a bit, Agni tools, that is helping improve Agni so that Ama is removed from the system, and using aloe vera gel. Now, one of the things that can happen for anyone who has IC is that they can get a bladder infection, a secondary infection. And this can be quite confusing to patients who have the problem, because oftentimes they'll go to the doctor, they're having symptoms, and a negative urine culture shows up. But there will be on occasion times when the bladder can get infected with interstitial cystitis. And in these cases, the symptoms just don't go away with conservative energy science measures. And so if you're not responding after a period of time to therapy, you should check with your physician to be sure that you don't have a secondary bacterial infection. So, as you recall, as we're ramping up in terms of these urinary tract infections that are supposedly urinary tract infections, but really aren't, they're just waves of the IC flares, you get to a point where you're operating just below the ceiling of symptoms. And so when you have an acute flare, this can be treated, as we talked about, with acute tools. But say you're not getting better here, and things just seem to be lingering. This would be the time that you should check with a culture to be sure that you're not having problems with a superimposed bacterial infection. We also said that, we want to stop. Let's see here. I'm going to have to go back to, we want to stop the hot and mobile qualities from entering the body to begin with. So in our situation here, by doing the nutritional formats, we stop these hot and mobile qualities from entering the body to begin with. And by using the nutritional formats, we can limit the amount of this coming into the body. But the other thing we would want to do is stop the Agni damaging things that we do on a regular basis. And this gets into our day-to-day routines. Using cold water or ice water on a regular basis helps plug up and reduce our digestive power. Not using or eating our biggest meal at noon is another way to reduce Agni. Not exercising to any degree on a regular basis can reduce Agni. Using incompatible food combinations can reduce Agni. So you can see that all of these various nutritional tools that we've talked about, and these various lifestyle habits that we have that may be affecting our digestive power, can be also damaging to the physiology and reduce our ability to heal the condition that we're after, namely IC. So this is essentially what we covered in session 1 and session 2. But now we want to go a little deeper into this whole issue of how we can augment these habits to help us along, so that then we're free to release the hot and mobile qualities as well as ama in the system. I wanted to spend just a brief amount of time talking about the Matter Science nutritional format, because it's so well accepted and so seemingly understood that it's not clear why it produces the IC to begin with. As a matter of fact, why Matter Science Nutrition can even produce the disease that we presently are dealing with, whether it's IC, fibromyalgia, chronic prostatitis, irritable bowel syndrome, or GERD. Currently, in the Matter Science tradition, you are not part of the equation. We know a lot about the molecular forms of what we take in, but it doesn't really take you into consideration. So because of that, we don't understand from a Matter Science nutritional point of view what is good and what is not good for us. So foods get studied and analyzed, but how they affect you and your physiology is not. And that's a very significant problem as we go forward talking about energy science nutrition. So Matter Science Nutrition is basically a quantitative approach. It measures everything, and you can see on this slide that we are now, or manufacturers of food products are asked to put down all the measurements that they have in their food product. And it gets to us in the form of counting calories, although I think that's somewhat going to the wayside. But even there, it's measuring things. And this leads to essentially nutritional pitfalls. Manufactured foods that are loaded with sugar in various forms, or margarine, which is dangerous in terms of its high trans fat content, is really not a healthy choice, are not healthy choices, and yet they are rampant within our culture because the food manufacturers need to make money in order to continue to put out these products. Unsalted butter, if you're going to use a good nutritional form of butter, is unsalted, and ghee is actually the best of all, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. So the energy science nutritional guiding points here is to stop the buildup of the hot and mobile qualities that come in to your physiology through the choices of foods that you make, but you don't look at a piece of broccoli in terms of hot and mobile, so how would you know? And that's why the nutritional formats are so important. The next thing is to stop the production of AMA, and this keeps these qualities locked in the pelvis, and this material is actually produced by lifestyle choices around the eating process that we covered in session 2. I'm going to give you a couple of links that you can use to read about coconut oil and red palm oil and ghee, but all of these help promote Agni, and they should be used relatively liberally in your nutritional diet. Your nutrition should have things to help buck up your Agni, your digestion. You can read about coconut oil, but coconut, as you would think, coconut oil is very cooling to the physiology, so it's an excellent oil to start using on a regular basis. Red palm oil also comes from desert climates, hot climates, and therefore would be soothing and cooling and pacifying to the hot quality. And ghee, which is essentially the oily essence of butter, is free of the trans fats. It has saturated fats. It tends to have antioxidant properties. And lastly, like its cousins, coconut oil and red palm oil, tends to promote Agni. Some people have asked on the threads about food cravings, and I wanted to touch upon this because it's a very common thing that everybody runs into as they start these kinds of nutritional formats. There are really two types of food cravings, ones that are healthy and ones that are not healthy. So generally unhealthy cravings are related to toxicity, that is, a lot of AMA in the system, coating on the tongue, irregular or ravenous appetite, and these foods that are craved actually act as magnets for our attention. And these abnormal cravings are related to the spreading of the qualities and AMA from the GI tract, or gut in this case. So what are common cravings? Well, pitta cravings, or people who have a lot of the hot quality in their physiology, tend to like hot, spicy foods. So it's a totally unhealthy food craving, right? Because we have people who happen to have an imbalance of the hot quality. They have too much of it in their bladder, yet they're craving hot, spicy foods. The treatment for this is to treat with sweet and cooling foods, like using coconut or sweet, not high sugar content like foods. We haven't talked a lot about kapha as an energy pattern. As you remember, as you may remember, that kapha is the energy pattern of stability in the physiology. these people tend to put on weight very easily. And so when they have abnormal cravings, not healthy cravings, but unhealthy cravings, they tend to look for heavy, cold foods, cold drinks, and cookies, candy, and chocolate, or CCC. Cookies, candy, and chocolate are the sweet taste that they're looking for, but it's a total craving because they really don't need the sweet taste. They don't need heavy foods, and their treatment is to use hot, spicy foods. So the bottom line is, eat according to your nutritional format for your energy body makeup, and in this group, it's all Vata Pitta, and use the Pitta Vata nutritional format, and try to do that as well as you can. And recognize that you may have these cravings, and when you do, just recognize them for what they are and choose the opposite. So if you're craving hot, spicy foods, look for something cooling, such as milk or dairy. Churns are groups of balancing spices, and they assure that all 6 tastes are present at any one meal. So, the 6 tastes are sweet, sour, salty, pungent, bitter, and astringent. These spices have these characteristics of these tastes, and because of that, they help balance the digestion, help us digest. And there's a churn recipe for Pitta Vata at the foodsheal.com website, and you can look that up and use those liberally in your cooking and eating. This is, as we were talking about earlier, this really gets into chronic day-to-day management. That is to say, use of churn at every meal will really ensure not only that you get a balanced meal, not only that you will stimulate your Agni, but you will also help improve the health of your GI tract. Churns or collections of spices or herbs are incredibly powerful to use wherever you are, whenever you're eating. You know, mother's milk is the perfect food, and and milk happens to carry all 6 tastes. So using a churn is like providing that perfect balanced meal that we get that keeps us sustained as we're growing from infancy on. I wanted to take a moment to talk about a chronic thing that you can do on a regular basis, and as people have asked about it in the past, and that is using juicing as a way to get nutrition. It's a great, awesome way to get nutrients that are easily available to your GI tract, and doing that on an intermittent basis, maybe once every 2 weeks, once a month, can be very, very helpful for you in terms of, again, helping improve your digestive tract and the health of the GI tract. It's essentially, as we say here, juicing made painless. It's a blender and a mixer combined, and it's about $100. You can get it at IC Solutions or on the Amazon site. Energy nutritional work means that we want to avoid glucose, and here's a really wonderful sampling of talking about the effect of glucose and how it can improve our health, and how if we use abnormal forms of glucose in terms of refined sugar or carbonated drinks, they will essentially affect our physiology. Also, avoiding manufactured foods in general is really a good rule of thumb. And we'll give you some homework to do around this particular topic. Using flatbreads is really important because, as we talked about in our last session, flatbreads can really affect digestion. And so the use of yeasted products really is deleterious to the GI tract and its function. And lastly, avoiding trans fats and using ghee on a regular basis is a much better alternative than ever considering using margarine, which is loaded with trans fats. Now, the pelvic accumulation of qualities is something I think that is really important to look at here. And essentially, what this says is that as we take on any disease, we take on qualities. And these qualities are cumulative in nature. They start with the cold quality, and then the hot, the mobile, subtle, and rough qualities. And these qualities then are collectively accumulated in the urinary tract, in the bladder. So in order to get rid of interstitial cystitis, we need to shed these qualities. We need to shed them in order to undergo healing. So it's important to realize this concept that these qualities, they add to one another. So there's more cold quality, then there's more dry and light quality, but they all add as they move up to manifest as interstitial cystitis. So from that viewpoint, then, we want to be careful. This is just another reason why we do nutritional work and the incompatible food combinations that we'll talk about, and buck up the digestive fire so that this pelvic accumulation of qualities is lessened. Now, this is a very basic energy science principle. It essentially says that all these symptoms that we have all occur because of multiple causes, multiple choices. So it's not just one thing that produces the problem of interstitial cystitis for you. It's multiple things that have led to this disease. Therefore, multiple forms of treatment work best. So, in other words, we want to throw the proverbial kitchen sink at this disease. Anything that makes sense from an energy science point of view, we want to use. So, yes, it makes sense to use aloe, but it's just not one thing again. It's not just aloe. Oh, and yes, we want to use the nutritional format, but we want to use many aspects of the nutritional format. So we want to reduce our needs for manufactured foods. We want to reduce our use of carbonated drinks. We want to reduce the hot, spicy foods that we may be craving because of our imbalances that are present. We want to take care of our Agni. We want to reduce our need for ice-cold drinks. And we want to take our biggest meal at noon. We want to have some form of exercise. We want to use, on a regular basis, churns with our cooking and seasoning, even when we're at restaurants. So you can see that all of these things that we've been talking about over the last 3 sessions are now all of a sudden coming together for us. And we're seeing that, oh, I see, yes, it makes sense that I would want to use these guidelines to help me throw the kitchen sink at this disease, that I'm going to use these kinds of treatment modalities because I want to get better. So there's another corollary to this kitchen sink principle, or another added rule, so to speak, added guideline. And that is, the more specific you can use to target your energy science treatments, the more effective you'll be in terms of getting a resolution. This speaks to the fact that when we're, say, using targeted herbal therapy to the vagina or to the bladder, where we are placing herbs directly into these systems for localized treatment, that it wouldn't make sense to use herbs that would carry the hot quality, would it? It wouldn't make sense, because we're trying to treat and eliminate and bring into balance the hot quality from the and remove that from the body. So we would want to be using herbs or things that help cooling. Hence, red palm oil that we talked about earlier, or coconut oil, aloe vera, shatavari, guduchi, gakshura. These are all cooling herbs and materials that can help us reduce the hot quality in the physiology. It's kind of akin to, say you have an injury to the back, and you can stretch, yes, you can stretch the entire back, but it would be better if you could look for ways to stretch very affected areas. That would be more specific to your treatment and healing. So the more specific we can be, the better we can be. But it starts out by choosing things that have cooling properties. And again, it harks back to our information about the nutritional formats. It's very, very important that these nutritional formats and attention to Agni continue to be worked over day by day, week by week, month by month, year by year. And in so doing, your symptoms of IC will dissipate, guaranteed. I wanted to talk a little bit about vulvodynia. That's an issue that comes up in threads and questions oftentimes. Actually, vulvodynia is an acute flare, what I would call an acute flare. It's not in the bladder, it's in the vagina instead. The hot quality is present not only in the urinary tract, and specifically the bladder, but it's also present in the reproductive layers of the female and the male genital system. So in the female, it's called vulvodynia, but in the male, the painful condition is called chronic prostatitis. So actually, chronic prostatitis and vulvodynia have some degree of correlation with one another, because of their sexual characteristics that bring them to our attention. Before I get on to homework, I just wanted to say some things about vulvodynia. As you do this work, the vulvodynia and the pain will become better, and sexual intercourse will be, you'll be capable of doing that again. Using the Shatavari tampon or the vaginal irrigations is also very, very helpful with respect to reducing the symptoms of vulvodynia, because it reduces the ama and it reduces the hot and mobile qualities. So for our homework, what I'd like to suggest is that you begin a daily diary of how you feel and what energy science tools you're using, and what you are adding and what you are unable to do. I think that this is very helpful for us because the matter, when we talked about the matter science, we were talking about the molecular field of the body, and now in these sessions we're talking about a different way of viewing the body, talking about viewing the body from an energy point of view, that the body is actually an energy field, not a molecular field. I should say actually that the matter field or the molecular field simultaneously coexists with the energy field. That is, you can look at yourself as a matter field, or you can look at yourself as an energy field. And neither way is right or wrong. It's just a way of seeing the body differently. And when we engage in this energy science way of treating disease, then we get an appreciation of all the many things that we can do in order to help aid in healing, because the model, the tradition of the energy science is very, very complete. And because of that, it helps us give us guidance with respect to the foods, which foods are imbalancing, which foods cause us disease, and in a very knowledgeable way help us understand that we are, in fact, as one of our participants said one time, I think I realized at one point that I was creating my disease, that I was creating my IC, but I don't know what to do about it. I don't know what things I should do in order to stop my unconscious creation of this disease that I have. And that's a very insightful statement, because that's exactly what the energy science would say, is that by our choices we create our diseases. We don't know it, but we are unconsciously creating our problem. So we'd want to try to eliminate those kinds of choices from our lifestyle, so that we can leave all the good ones behind. And believe me, you are all making good choices. The issue is which choices are not so good and which are not so supportive of your health. And that really is the heart of the recommendations that come from the energy science work. It's essentially saying, look, these choices don't really support you very well. Here are some choices that really do. And oh, by the way, you're really doing some good things here. Just keep those up. So with that, I think what we'll do is suggest that using a diary on a regular basis, on a day-to-day basis, can be a great way to focus your attention on what kinds of choices you're making, what kind of choices do you want to change, and what kind of choices are really ones that are great for you and you're making good, and these choices you want to keep. It's also helpful to, at the same time, chart some of your symptoms, because by charting your symptoms, you get to appreciate how subtly you're getting better. And that's a real issue in our present and current science, because the current science, the matter science, deals with the gross manifestations of disease. And then when the gross manifestations occur, then it pulls out various tools to help the body heal. In the energy science, it's different. In the energy science, we select particular things that produce subtle changes to the physiology. So the matter science, the molecular way of looking at the body, is gross. And in contrast, there is an energy science approach which deals with the subtle realms of the disease process. So there you have the contrast of the subtle energy field work and the gross matter field work. So with that in mind, if you are paying attention by journaling, you'll notice the subtle changes that occur for you that you wouldn't have otherwise noticed, because you're now journaling. You're now paying attention. You're now making observations and making changes accordingly based on the history of choices that you're making. We would also suggest that you continue to use tools to improve your Agni. As we said, Agni is a very important concept, and we want to be sure that Agni is really stoked, that it's really hot and ready for the experience of not only the food that you're ingesting now, but also to burn off the ama that you have and that you've been collecting over the years with your IC. The use of churns here cannot be underestimated with respect to what they can do in terms of helping you with your digestion. I would use the churn in your at the table, sprinkling it on salad or using it on your food. But also I recommend that you use it on a regular basis in your cooking. Just have that churn available and use it in your cooking at any point in time. The other thing I would suggest is that when you go out to eat or if you're traveling, using the churn can be very, very helpful in terms of delivering not only all the 6 tastes, but it would also help improve your digestion. We know that digestion suffers when we travel. So using this churn when you're traveling is also very, very helpful. Lastly, I would suggest you making a list of 1 or 2 of your manufactured foods that you use on a regular basis, and I would then take a look and see if you can remove those from your kitchen. Try to slowly start getting rid of those problematic foods, even if it's going to cost you a little bit to remove it from your pantry or from your kitchen cupboards. It's much better to do that than to be stuck with looking at these foods all the time and wondering what you're going to do with them. I think the easiest and best thing to do is just to dump them in the garbage and start from scratch. So, are there any questions about that? Anybody want to raise their hand? Or? Yeah, Amy. I'm going to unmute you, Amy.
Unmuted.
Amy?
Amy? Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can.
Yeah, I can. Wow.
We've got a kind of an echo here. I'll have to check into that.
Okay, I actually sent you, I typed the questions. Can you see them?
Let me take a look.
Let me take a look.
Great.
I can read them if you need me to.
I'm going to see if I can pull this down. Okay, let's see. You mentioned the Marma points are the same as acupuncture points. So, are you a big proponent of an acupuncture as therapy for healing of IC? I am. But the problem is that you have to make an appointment to go see the acupuncturist. You have to take time out of your day in order to do that. If you're in an acute flare, or going to the acupuncturist may be a problem, may be difficult. So I'm a big proponent of self-applied acupuncture therapy, which is essentially what we talked about last time in terms of Marma therapy. And because of that, then I think that becomes a much more effective way of dealing with your disease. And so using it particularly around the acute flares can be very, very effective. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I had one other question. I wanted to ask about exercise.
Yes.
Okay, as a way of releasing the hot quality. And I've been noticing I got like an exercise bike in my apartment, and I've been able to, because I was in bed for 5 months, and I've been increasing my exercise, and I find I'm feeling better. Is that releasing the hot quality too?
Actually, what that's treating is Agni. So if you think about this disease in two different ways, you think about it in terms of the qualities, but then also think of it in terms of this ama that we've talked about. What keeps the hot and mobile qualities in the pelvis, particularly in the bladder and the vagina, actually is because of this sticky, gooey substance that's called ama. And when you exercise, you enhance Agni and you burn off the ama. So that's why exercise is so helpful in terms of blowing off this Agni. And then that allows this hot and mobile quality to be released from the urinary tract. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I've noticed that my digestion is my digestion is really pretty good right now. And so I guess that's a real positive thing, huh?
It is. And as we've talked about, Agni is essentially measured in two different ways. One is based on the coating on the tongue. So if there is a coating on the tongue, then you know AMA is present in the system. The other way of understanding how Agni is doing in the body is to look at your appetite. So if your appetite is rich and strong, that's really great.
Mm-hmm. I noticed my tongue is really red now. I mean, it's a lot redder, and there's a little bit of white in the back, but my tongue is really pretty good. It's looking very vibrant.
That's great. Yeah. So what you're really looking for, Amy, is you're looking for the tongue to be like a little baby's tongue. Babies have great Agni. They came out of the incubator and they're really healthy, right? So in their setting, that's what your tongue should look like, a baby's tongue.
But a baby's tongue is pretty light in color, but we're older, right? So if your tongue is really red, that's appropriate for an adult, right?
Actually, the red quality of the tongue, if it's really quite red and vibrant, actually means that there's actually hot quality in the system. And that would explain why you're having IC in essence.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I just don't remember if my tongue was really a lot lighter or not. I don't remember, to be honest with you.
The important thing about reading the tongue is the continuum. That is, everybody should be a student of their tongue and what it looks like in various times of the day, what times of season, etc. Because that is a great way of monitoring your health, particularly around Agni. And there's a phrase that goes in the energy science world: "You're only as old as your Agni." And what that says is you're only as healthy as your Agni. So we should become students of our Agni and monitor the process like that.
Dr. Dean, I haven't heard you mention the pulse, which is really big in Ayurvedic. Yeah. What about the pulse? What do you look for in the pulse?
Well, there are seven levels of pulse, and it's obvious that we can't use the pulse in this setting, but the pulse is really a very important aspect of evaluating, diagnosing, and monitoring treatments of patients who come to you in an office setting. Unfortunately, we can't do your pulse. There are ways to do the pulse over the phone line, but I haven't yet explored that to any great degree. But the bottom line is that you're right. The pulse is important not only in Ayurveda but also in the traditional Oriental medicine discipline as well. But we don't have the luxury of having you here in person in order to check that out.
Okay. Thank you.
Great. Thanks for your questions, Amy. I'll go to other participants. Anybody else have any questions? Jean or Trudy? You can just raise your hand. If you don't, it's okay. Great. So I'd like to cover another aspect of this nutritional format that we've talked about, because this question has come up from some people about the meaning of incompatible food combinations. And certain foods get digested at different rates. Just think about this. You've taken a piece of meat and you've chewed that up, and then right after that you've taken a piece of watermelon. And the two foods just don't, they're different totally in terms of their consistency, in terms of their quality, in terms of their oiliness. All of that changes, or all of that shows that these two foods, watermelon and a piece of meat, are just different. And it intuitively then says to us that when you take these foods and put them into your GI tract together, that they are digested differently and at different rates. This is a very, very important concept, because what it says is that certain foods will interfere with the digestion, absorption, and assimilation of other foods. So that watermelon that you take in will interfere with the digestion, absorption, and or assimilation of the meat that you're now eating as well. So it's this concept of incompatibility of certain foods together that is brought to the forefront with respect to the energy science nutrition. It's a very important concept because these combinations produce flares, either by increasing the hot and mobile qualities or increasing AMA, or both. So common examples of these incompatible food combinations are putting fruit with smoothies along with yogurt, or brown rice, or using vegetables with the fruit. Fruit should be kept separate. It shouldn't be used with any other food. And when we put fruit with other foods, you run the risk of producing yourself or giving yourself a flare. A common food that we see is baked potato with sour cream. Nightshades should not be associated with dairy, and the potato is a nightshade. Sour cream is dairy, so therefore this combination can result in a flare. Beans with cheese, meat, eggs, milk, or yogurt equals an omelet or a Spanish food combination, such as a burrito with cheese with the beans. Common breakfast combinations, such as eggs with milk, eggs with cheese, eggs with fruit, eggs with yogurt or meat, eggs with meat or beans, all really bad combinations. When you see these combinations, you should run. You should run as fast as you can, because these are combinations that you could be doing everything right with respect to your nutritional format, and then get into these and still not be well. Now, typical combinations that are safe are eggs without milk or cheese, cheese and meat together. You know, you'd see cheese and meat on a cheese and meat platter at buffets. Those are great combinations. And you can see why here, after I've described these incompatible food combinations. Cheese and meat are both equally dense, and so they would be great partners to meet up in the GI tract and be digested, because they would be happily digested at the same rate. Yogurt by itself with sucanat, which is crystallized cane sugar that is unrefined sugar. It's an excellent product. Turbinado is similar to sucanat, it's just a different crystal. But using this mixed with the yogurt is excellent to use, because yogurt is actually broken down milk protein that has been incubated and broken down more, so it's really good, but it has the tendency for a little bit of a sour taste to it. So adding the sweet taste with respect to sucanat can be excellent. We'll talk more about yogurt in our next session. Milk by itself is really, in my mind, the only way to go. Using milk with other foods, or using milk with out of the refrigerator cold, not good. Using milk warmed or as a warm drink is excellent. But milk has gotten really a bad rap, and people are claiming lactose intolerance, but in reality, it's not lactose intolerance. It's just plain poor Agni, weak Agni. And the milk, which is a great food, we grew up on it, right? We grew up with milk. It was the perfect food for us as an infant, and yet now it's not good for us. Most of the time, the milk intolerances are related to lousy Agni. Flatbreads are really, really important to start using. Chapati or tortilla used as wraps are excellent ways of using or getting your grains. And cooked grains such as oatmeal or barley are also excellent. And then hot drinks without other foods, I think, comes along the same lines as what we've talked about with respect to milk. Use it alone and try not to encourage use with other foods. So I think that that's for us a wrap. Any other questions? Let's see. Amy, do you have another question?
Unmuted.
Amy, do you have another question?
Can you hear me?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, okay, cool. What about almond milk? Is that coming in the same category as milk as far as compatibility, like with oatmeal and that type of thing?
That's a beautiful question. And you know, the nut milks like almond milk or coconut milk, these are excellent milks to use as milk substitutes. So I would suggest using these on a regular basis. They're now made so that they can deliver even more milk or even more calcium than milk can deliver at any given one volume versus comparing that of the other.
Okay. Another question I have is, because I'm sitting here eating some pears and some coconut and some sliced blanched almonds. Are the almonds okay with the fruit?
Yes, they are.
Okay.
There's not a problem with that. Sounds good.
Yeah, it's real yummy. But, it's funny. Now I'm aware, because we were talking about combinations. I had a big salad at lunch, and how long in between is it safe to introduce the other food, like the fruit, like an hour after the digestion starts?
That's a beautiful question again. So what you'd want to do is use use about a 2-hour window. Sometimes people will serve fruit with at the end of a meal, and so here it is. You're at a friend's house, well-meaning. they want to prepare this wonderful meal for you, and they serve the chicken with an orange sauce. That may not be too much of a problem because the orange has been so changed in the cooking that it might not be a problem. But then the fresh fruit comes along at the end of the meal, and there are one or two ways to deal with that. The first is to eat it and depend that your agni is going to be strong enough to deal with that incompatible food combination. The second way to deal with it is to just linger with it and let the meal pass on down the GI tract and get into the small bowel before you start introducing the fruit. And I used the guideline of 2 hours, but I think that within a half an hour, foods should be, unless it's a large meal, food should be pretty much out of the stomach and into the small bowel so that there won't be interference with digestion, absorption, and assimilation.
That's good. That's good. I have one other question.
Yeah.
They always talk in IC circles about the calcium citrate is really good for IC. And I recently tried to switch because I was taking regular calcium like a carbonate. And I tried to switch to the calcium citrate, and they're adding some of the minerals for bones and whatnot. And I don't know, I may not be reacting very well to that. Do you have any ideas about the calcium supplements? Does it really matter on this scale?
I really personally don't believe that there's a difference. And the problem with the citrate is that it's a salt. Calcium citrate is a salt of citric acid. So whenever you hear the word acidic, you want to run if you've got IC, because acidity delivers the hot quality. The acidity, our taste around acidity is the sour taste. So the sour, the salty, and the pungent taste, hot chilies, cayenne pepper, chili pepper, horseradish, these three tastes carry the hot quality. So when you want to step back and you're asking yourself, which taste do I want to support, you'd want to support the sweet, the bitter, and the astringent taste. These are cooling tastes. The heating tastes are sour, salty, and pungent.
Okay. Thank you.
You bet. Anyone else? Okay, ladies, I think that's a wrap. And I appreciate your attention. Appreciate your questions. And overall, I just appreciate you all for your, wanting to, your bravery and courage to take a look in a different way. Oh, Trudy. Yeah, Trudy. Are you on, or you're not there? Oh, let's see if you had a question. Okay, no. All right. I guess for that, I guess we'll go ahead and leave it for now. And next week is our last session together. And at that time, we'll talk about what life can be like after you've got your IC under control. Because I think that this is a journey that we're all taking together. So we want to realize that, things as we move along in this course of healing IC, is one of understanding what things you can expect when you start healing it, and you're out of this problem of constant icy flares. Okay, take care. Best of everything.